Whoa. First of all, a disclaimer, because I used to be a political consultant. Anything I say only reflects what my opinions are, does not reflect any third party, does not reflect what GlobalSF says. And the goal of today, and of course the goal of the last 2 days, is for everyone to walk away with a better understanding of what's going on. For me, I like providing context, ergo, I tell a lot of stories. But we'll go from there, okay? First of all, who founded modern day China? You guys have been here now the last 2 days. I expect you guys to know. Come on. Yes, okay. Who is known for starting the CPC, Communist Party of China? Thank you. Xi Jinping is? Okay, China's president was, correct, China's president. Deng Xiaoping, does that ring a bell? Yes? Yeah. He opened China, as many, sorry?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Opium War was fought with who? Wow, you guys are really good. Huawei is, we already know. Okay. And SOE is?
State-owned enterprise.
Okay, I wish I had gift cards for everyone. You'll see all the answers shortly. Princeling is?
Children of former party leaders.
Yeah, children of former party leaders or of founders of major enterprises in China. The manufacturing capital of China is? Shenzhen, part of Guangdong, but Dongguan actually probably beat Shenzhen, but you have Huawei, so they're going to fight. Okay. China's population is? 1.4, 1.9 billion. Okay, and what is PRC versus ROC? If you're here today, you better. Let's look at the answers. You guys did a good job. 1.4, but okay, for China. Okay? People's Republic of China versus the Republic of China, Taiwan, even though there's pictures of Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek when they were growing up. Oops. Next. What do you know about US-China trade? When did US-China relations normalize? And with who? Mao and who? Okay. What year? Kissinger went in 71, Nixon went in 72. Okay. And what US market accounts for what, and the US market accounts for what percentage of China exports? You'll find out. I'll show you. And who is the largest trading partner in the US for China? Let's see. As I said, Nixon normalized relations with China in 1972. There's a picture of them talking, one of the many meetings. They started what we refer to today as ping pong diplomacy. And the US market accounts for 20% of China's exports. And California actually is one of the biggest trading partners for China. We imported a total of $441 billion. And China was actually the largest source of imports at $161.1 billion. And then we exported a total of $26.2 billion to China, including Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is now part of China. Did you guys know that our largest import to China is not computer and electronics, but it's actually services? What services? Legal services, banking, right? Those are all services. Seriously, we export a lot. Legal services, almost every single law firm I have now has a China practice, and they have offices in China, really. And then, so computer electronics is only 4.1 billion, machinery 2.4, transportation 1.5, chemicals 1.4 billion, waste and scrap 1.3 billion. Name some scrap materials and waste that we're exporting.
Garbage, cardboard, newspaper.
Yeah, newspaper, plastic. Did you know that one of the first things that we were exporting was our used rubber tires? Yeah, and as for the service industry, 9.1 billion in 2016 alone, 61,000 jobs in the state of California. That's amazing, right? Okay, foreign direct investment. this is actually one area that I do a lot of work in. But starting in, I would say, I always say, this is my one story, and I'll share one of my stories. When I joined China SF, Mayor Ed Lee at the time had appointed me to head up China SF in 2012. So in 2013, we actually co-hosted a Invest in U.S. Real Estate Summit, right, at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. And I was, and our ambassador at the time was Gary Locke. So I remember arriving in Beijing on Sunday. We had the summit on Monday. And then on Tuesday, I got on the plane to come back because I couldn't spend that much time in China. On Wednesday, I had an investor actually arrive in California, in San Francisco, on his private jet. He is now one of my biggest investors. They have invested now probably close to $3 billion, right? But he has said to everyone, I only want to stay in California, and he really has not left the state. Even though he's looked at New York and Boston, they have only invested in the state of California, which is cool. But real estate is not the only thing that Chinese investors invested. However, for the amount of investment that comes in from China, Canada is actually a bigger investor, right, or a bigger source of foreign investment than China. A lot of people don't know that. We always hear about China. I don't know if it's the xenophobia or what have you, but it is what it is. So, but as a result of the trade wars, the foreign direct investment has stopped, or dropped. I should not say stopped. I'm actually getting more quality investment now. It dropped in 2015 to $5.4 billion only. And the thing is that if people say, you know what, it's because of Trump, actually it isn't. If you think about it, it's actually probably because, actually I would call it, it's because Xi Jinping decided, I want you guys to focus your money on China. I'm not letting you take the money out of China anymore. So it's been really difficult for Chinese enterprises to get the money out. They just won't let it come out. There's so many controls. It's not like in the US. We do whatever we want with the money, right? We're used to freedom. We're a democratic country. In China, it doesn't happen that way. Their RMB is still not convertible. And they have SAFE, right? SAFE, and then that's one of the agencies that actually control foreign exchange and currency. So the money has not been coming out, mainly because of that reason, and also now with Xi Jinping, with the two administrations fighting about, you know, literally what I say, it is the technology war. The foreign direct investment has decreased significantly from China. Looking back in history, did you know that our trade relationship with China started in 1784? Maybe earlier than that. Do you guys know that? What kind of products did we trade back then with China? Yes. Tea, textiles, and then what did the US sell to them? You got ginseng, but also furs and what have you, right? So there are a lot of goods that were being exchanged. However, what happened, and then we talk about the Opium War, because the US wanted so much more from China, right, than they could export, they started selling opium to make enough money so they could buy the products back from China, right? Because China was making furniture for them, making you know, plates and what have you, teas and everything else, and spices. So Opium War started, and then Hong Kong became a British colony, and for 99 years, and then in 1997 it went back to China. Does anybody know the result of what's been going on with Hong Kong? Well, let me elaborate. I like to tell the story, and I'm going to probably tell too many stories, that China, let me put the backtrack. Shanghai has traditionally been the port and trading city of China, right? And then communists came in, they took over. You guys know this already, I don't have to be here. But the thing is that, you know, communism took over They closed the doors to the West. And then Hong Kong became a British colony. So Hong Kong became basically the door to China, right? So for 99 years, that happened. And then, but prior to 97, and even when you see with the opening of China and everything, you'll see that China has been slowly but surely trying to replace Hong Kong as a force and as a financial center, actually, or a go-to place for China. Because with economic growth, and then when I mentioned, when I asked earlier about Deng Xiaoping, what did he do actually? Deng Xiaoping was educated in France, which I think is always important. I actually always tell parents and I tell friends and family, I know you grew up in China, I know you grew up in the United States, but if you ever have a chance to go and live and work in a different country, do it, because you come back with a whole totally different perspective. I myself actually did that. I was born in Hong Kong, actually, but I came here when I was 10 months old, so what am I? I'm actually American born, right? I say American born less 10 months. Anyways, and then I went back to Hong Kong to work for 10 years, and that's actually when I learned how to do business with China. That's when I learned how to speak Mandarin, because my friends will tell you when I first went back to Hong Kong, even my Cantonese, one sentence, one word in Chinese, the rest is English, right? By the time I left in 10 years later, I could speak Mandarin, and I could say a whole sentence in Chinese. Yay! But that was a long time ago. And then what I'll say with Deng Xiaoping is that because he was educated overseas, he really knew what China needed to do in order to catch up with the rest of the world, right? Let me tell you a story. When the communists took over, when the communists, as I say, were coming in, my grandfather left China. He was KMT. And then, I'm sorry, I didn't know this would happen. So he left when, because he was KMT. The communists were moving into the village. All his fellow, cousins and brothers saying, you better leave because, you're going to go to jail soon. So he left with his second wife and went to Hong Kong. And my dad, stayed in China. He went to Guangzhou. And then in the mid-50s, decided, I'm going to go to Hong Kong. And so he did, to join his dad. And then shortly after that, he came to the US with my mom in '63, right? Because if you're Chinese, you have to go to America for the Golden Mountains, right? You have to find a way to make money overseas, because if you stay in Hong Kong, who knows what you're going to end up doing at the time. In 1972, 1971, 72, my dad calls my grandfather, hey, I'm going back to China. Are you crazy? My dad did. And he went to China for the very first time. He actually started his China trade business at that time. Prior to that, he'd gone to Taiwan. But as soon as Nixon went, he said, I'm going to go. So he went back to China. And that's where I say I started learning about China. And that's my China experience. That's where it all started. Yes, the 10 years in Hong Kong did make a big difference. But the experience that my dad brought to me, to the table, actually helped me know and made me who I am today. So that being said, open door policy led to opening. That was when Deng Xiaoping decided we have to do things in China differently, open to the rest of the world, and two, internally, let's set up some special economic zones so that we can help those create a mechanism where we can attract foreign direct investment, and then set up policies where companies can actually grow a lot faster than the rest of the country, and basically help people make money, right? But they wanted to create a mechanism to attract the foreign direct investment at the time. So the special economic zones were started about the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and I remember they were in Shenzhen, they were in Shantou, they were in Xiamen, right? And then those places have grown significantly since then, clearly. I remember in 1977, my first time to China, I was in Shenzhen. It was like a fishing village. Nothing was going on, right? You cross the border in Hong Kong. You're sitting in a train station that actually looks like a shack, right? I was sitting on these crate barrels, little crates. That was my chair, and I ordered a bottle of Vitasoy. Everybody know what Vitasoy is? Okay. And I had my bowl of noodles. I remember that was my meal. And then we got transported. Then we took the train to Guangzhou. And then from Guangzhou, I flew to Beijing. That was my first trip to China, 1977, with my dad. And then as a result of that, for example, and then I'll say, and the reason why I bring that story up is because today, Shenzhen has grown and has become a metropolis, right? We have Huawei Huawei is actually headquartered there. We have Vanke that's headquartered there. We have quite a lot of real estate developers that are headquartered there as well. Apple phones were actually made in Shenzhen for quite a while, right? But the thing is that that was the hub as a result of the special economic zone that was created. That actually now, if you go there, the only natives are the children who were born to parents who had moved from different provinces, right? Everybody basically from Shenzhen, the natives, they probably don't exist anymore. It's really weird. It's a very, very diverse, very, very, in terms of Chinese, right? Chinese nationals, very, very diverse city. When you're there, you're basically transient and you move around. So that was the special economic zones. Foreign trade zones. Forward 20 years later, China wanted more stimulation. And they created the foreign trade zones because we're starting to complain about, hey, your RMB, your dollar is not convertible. Oh, does anybody remember what a FEC is? Has anybody heard of what FEC is? Foreign exchange certificate, right? Foreign exchange certificate. So back in the day, foreigners were not allowed to use the Chinese currency RMB. They could only use foreign exchange certificates because that was converted from, foreign currencies, right? So we can only use foreign exchange certificates. I remember a time when my dad's friend was so upset at having to use only FEC, he took up an RMB and burnt it in front of everyone in China. Can you imagine what kind of spectacle that created? Anyway, okay, enough of my stories. And then so the foreign trade zones, in the early, I would say 2010, it was about 2010, 2012, China started to look at starting foreign trade zones because they wanted to and the thing about China, I'll give them credit is that whenever they want to do something, they don't come up with a plan. These special economic zones, they were all kind of incubators in their own right. The companies that go there, it's like no law, it's a lawless land. Francis, correct me if I'm wrong. But the thing is that it was really like, you can go there, basically do whatever you want. I remember when I was talking to someone from China Development Bank, and this was back in 2013, I said, so, and we're in Shanghai, and he was sitting in the foreign trade zone, or the free trade zone, as some other people call it. And I said, so what's gonna happen with RMB? I mean, you guys, they say that RMB is gonna be able to go in and out of these trade zones freely. So I can have people remit RMB out of like Lingang, right, to San Francisco. They can buy a piece of property and then have it converted to US dollars in the States. He goes, I really don't know. You heard this all the time. Because and people actually have also learned, they're afraid to also take the first step, right? They don't want to get in trouble, right? Because they don't want to go to jail. People are still going to jail even though they have, the one example I like to use is high-speed rail, right? The guy who made high-speed rail in China probably built the most number of kilometers of rail known to mankind. He was thrown in jail, even though he did what he did. He was thrown in jail for corruption. Okay, you're thrown in jail, but imagine, nothing you did for the country is good enough if you set a bad example, bang, you're in jail, which is really sad. Yes, he did deserve it, but it's sad at the same time. Anyway, so the foreign trade zones. I can say I haven't seen any benefit come out of it. I haven't seen any more business happen as a result of it. And so I always say China is always coming out with ways or initiatives. I call them propaganda. Belt and Road. Has anybody heard about Belt and Road? I'm not asking you anymore. I want to hear from someone else. Yes. Tell me what Belt and Road is. Okay. Can someone tell me what Belt and Road is?
The modern-day Silk Road is opening up both land and sea routes, but going to other locations.
Yeah.
More inland.
Right. So the thing is that, yes, it is kind of the modern Silk Road, but I think it's smart that Xi Jinping is using the Silk Road as his way to dominate the world because he doesn't want the US to do it. That's what I say. Correct me if I'm wrong, but at the end of the day, it's all a way for them to say, I can do it without the US. And because the US is always asked, so what is the role for United States now that China has the Silk Road? I mean, you guys aren't on the map. We compete. Right? That's what Americans are doing. We're competing, and that's what China is doing now. And the last initiative I want to talk about that China has been talking about for the last 2 years is the Greater Bay Initiative. Because in China, can anybody rattle off 2 or 3 of the bays in China, where they are? So Hong Kong, I mean, in Guangdong province, you have the Pearl River, the bay, and then Yangtze River, Yangtze Delta Bay, and then further north in Tianjin, you have that bay. So there's 3 bays in China. And again, similar to the foreign trade zones, the special economic zones, China says, let's create these greater bays, right, to make them the center or the hubs for technology and innovation. And I'm saying, okay, let's see what we can do. It's actually an opportunity, if you think about it. It's an opportunity for companies and cities and organizations. And I'm actually, to be quite frank, I said GlobalSF will partner with you, and we are actually meeting with them to say, hey, what kind of exchanges can we officially have, right? I will represent the city of San Francisco, the Bay Area. We will work with, at this point, maybe the Pearl River Delta Bay, and say, what are some of the exchanges we have, whether it be innovation, right? Are we going to look at AI, right? Are we going to look at telecommunications? 5G at the end of the day is what everybody's talking about, but I think China really needs a lot of help. And I actually also always call China the copycat nation, because when I was working in Hong Kong, I was working in, I call it fine chemicals, but it was actually generic pharmaceuticals, right? And we had them, China was the biggest manufacturer of generic pharmaceuticals, the powders, right? The white powder, I call them drugs, they're literally drugs. So China was actually the biggest manufacturer of generic pharmaceuticals for many years. And then when it came to copycat, they were the first also in the world to come up with and to reverse engineer all the, like 5FU. I know I don't like to talk about that because it's a cancer drug. But the thing is that they were also very, very quick when it came to reverse engineering products that would be coming off patent soon. So China is a nation that has traditionally, for centuries, been a copycat nation. They really lack the innovation, but they do have a lot of smart people. And as a result of trade wars, I said, you know what? China will find a way to make things happen, even with whatever is happening here with the trade, with the tariffs and everything. China will find a way to make things happen. And all of a sudden, I lost my train of thought. China, that's why China has been looking and working with incubators and co-work space in the US, right? To say, can you please come and help us start an incubator? Some of the companies I can rattle off, 500 startups has been spoken to. Rocket Space, has anybody heard of Rocket Space? Rocket Space is the incubator that came up with Uber, or they incubated Uber. That's their claim to fame. So just FYI, if anybody ever asked you. But companies like this from the Valley have been asked, right, to go to China. So I see that the Greater Bay Initiative, they're going to want to attract companies like Rocket Space to their spaces so that they can build these incubators of more technology. Not that China is not doing much of it now, right? Tencent is spending a lot of money in this space, right? And Baidu is probably spending a lot of money in this space. But that's what's going on. Let me see if there's some notes that I wanted to share, because I may forget. Okay. Oh, billionaires. How many billionaires do you think China has? Or let me backtrack and say, Which country has the most billionaires in the world? China. I'm sorry. China has the most billionaires. In 2018, worldwide, we have 2,000, this is 2018, okay? Worldwide, we had 2,208 billionaires. In China, we had 819. In the US, we had 571 only. India had 56. Those are the top 3 countries with the greatest number of billionaires in the world. By the end of 2018, because of what had been going on in China, whether it be, you can say, because of looking inward policy that Xi Jinping has started, or whether it's because of the trade war, China lost 50 billionaires. China alone lost 50 billionaires. Just thought I'd share stats. Let's see. Chinese global companies. Have you guys all seen these? I want to ask a question. How many of you here have been to China? Wow, everyone. Okay. Have you guys, and what do you think of, how am I going to phrase this question? When you think about, okay, when you hear that, the government is watching you, how do you feel when you're in China versus the US? Let me share a story. When I was in Guizhou, does everybody know where Guizhou is? No? Yes? Guizhou is actually the home of Mao Tai. You guys know what Mao Tai is? You guys know what Mao Tai is. If you've been to China, you know what Mao Tai is, right? It's the baijiu. It's basically the vodka of China, or the branded baijiu of China. It's the home of Mao Tai, or the province, actually. In Guangxi, which is the capital of that province, we were invited to visit a data center. And I walked in. And they're being supported by Baidu and also by Alibaba. But you walk in there, you realize that China has their eye on every single person in the country. It doesn't matter if you're foreign or domestic, they have their eye on every single person in the country. I mean, they were showing us the cameras, the data that they were collecting, right? If you're walking on the street, if you're in a bus, if you're in a car, they have cameras everywhere. So, my next question is, how much do you think you're being watched in the US?
Same.
Right? You've got Alexa, you use Siri, everybody uses the Google. I personally had decided I'm not getting an Alexa in the house. I don't want anybody hearing what's going on in my home, right? But we're being monitoring just as much, but in a different way, right? Yes?
So with these lists of companies here, I've noticed one that is missing, and I guess I could be wrong, but where does Wish fall under? Is that even like a major player?
No, this is not inclusive, or exclusive, what have you. I was just providing an example of global companies from China.
I
Yeah.
just didn't know, like, if that, it's popular here.
Mhm.
I didn't know if it had any sort of, like, stakes as far as a major player, like Alibaba does.
They probably do, but I'm not sure what extent. Sorry, I can't, provide more insight. Okay. And then has everybody knows Huawei. We're going to talk a little bit more about Huawei. Lenovo. Oh, and Lenovo, when we talk about privacy, another thing that my organization, as a rule, we have actually said, you are not buying any electronic equipment in China if you're going to use, or if you do personally, I don't care. If you're going to use it for business purposes, you are buying all your electronic equipment in the US, because they do install tracking devices in equipment made in China. Yes, Lenovo does that. Just want to let you know. If you think you're going to go to China and buy a Lenovo computer because it's cheaper, you're going to be tracked, and it's not going to be funny. I had my staff come back and clean up the whole hard drive, just FYI. So we did that. Everybody knows what Xiaomi is? Yeah, cool. Xiaomi. Huawei. I actually wanted to use Huawei as a point of discussion, and we actually started when Francis talked about what is the trade war all about. But did you guys get, have you guys read up on how Huawei is being introduced in Wiki? Can we read that, go through that? Let's read what they say they are, or I don't know who wrote this, okay? Huawei is a Chinese multinational technology company that provides telecommunications equipment and sells consumer electronics, including smartphones, and is headquartered in Shenzhen, Guangdong Province. The company was founded in 1987 by Ren Zhengfei. Initially focused on manufacturing phone switches, Huawei has expanded its business to include building telecom networks, providing operational consulting services, equipment enterprises inside and outside of China, manufacturing communications devices for the consumer market. Huawei has over 188,000 employees as of September 2018. Around 76,000 of them engaged in R&D. They have 21 R&D institutes around the world, including US, but I think they're shutting it down and moving out. And in the late 2010s, opened the dedicated Oxhorn campus. As of 2017, the company invested $13.8 billion US dollars in R&D alone. Huawei has deployed its products and services in more than 170 countries. As of 2011, it served 45 of the 50 largest telecom operators, numbering over 1,500, each 1/3 of the world's population. Huawei overtook Ericsson in 2012 as the largest telecoms equipment manufacturer in the world, and overtook Apple in 2018 as the second largest manufacturer of smartphones in the world, behind Samsung, as Francis already told you all. It ranks 72nd on the Fortune Global 500 list. In December 2018, Huawei reported that its annual revenue had risen to $108.5 billion US dollars, and that was a 21% increase over 2017. Though they are successful, as we all know, Huawei has faced difficulties in some markets due to cybersecurity allegations, primarily from the United States government, that Huawei's infrastructure equipment may enable surveillance by the Chinese government, especially with the development of 5G wireless networks, which China has aggressively promoted. There have been calls from the US to prevent the use of products by Huawei or fellow Chinese telecom ZTE by the US or its allies. Huawei has argued that its products pose no greater cybersecurity risks than those of any other vendor, and that there is no evidence of the US espionage claims. Nonetheless, Huawei pulled out the US consumer market in 2018 after these concerns affect the ability to market the consumer products there. With intensification in May 2019, in the midst of ongoing trade war between China and the US, Huawei is restricted from doing commerce in the US with US companies and not just with the federal government, due to alleged previous willful violations of US sanctions against Iran. On June 20th, our president reached an agreement to resume talks with China and announced that he would ease the aforementioned sanctions on Huawei. Thoughts? How much do you think is propaganda? It's not a test. I really wanted a conversation about this. Yes?
I have some friends in high tech who said it's just a common occurrence that whenever they've worked with a Chinese company, that the Chinese company has stolen their processes and their technology. They openly say that. So as much as I was trying to defend Huawei at first, I actually posted on Facebook, like, this is just US propaganda. And a lot of my friends who work for tech companies said, no, it's not. They steal everything.
So there's a couple of things going on. Yeah, so there are a couple of issues here, right? One is China stealing technology from the US. I'll say anyone will and can, it doesn't matter what color, nationality, or country you're from. One, that happens, right? Second of all, in the US of A, when you have a contract with any government entity, they make sure that you follow certain criteria. You cannot do business with Iran. You cannot, do this, that, and the other. I will confirm that they stupidly said, we are not doing business with Iran, when they actually do have a contract with Iran, right? So if you do that, of course, you cannot do business with the US federal government. Like if I were to do business with Iran, my contract with the city of San Francisco would be automatically, stopped and canceled because you can't do that. Yes?
I think that it's kind of worrisome because in the United States we do have that, like it's a code and a moral code and an understanding and it's a trust whether it's in words or writing. And when somebody violates that openly with, multiple different contracts, I think it just makes people really nervous
Mm-hmm.
as far as stability goes with trade or and just the amount of loss that you can have because of the amount of money that's being traded.
Yeah, agreed. I think in the US, from a context perspective, we're all about ethics. We have a code of ethics that everybody abides by. It doesn't matter what industry you're from. And even teachers, you all have your own code of ethics. I know in my world, I have our code of ethics, and I always tell people, we represent America. We don't represent our clients. We are trying to do business with our clients, but we represent America, right? Because that's actually a conversation I've had to have with my staff who are originally from China, right? And I say, stop. Who are you representing? Can you please use that position? You're representing San Francisco. So to your point with that. And I think that when we talk about the education system then, I don't know what they teach when it comes to ethics in China, but in the US, I think we all were raised that way, right? And especially in California, right? Where we hold everyone to a higher bar as a result of that. So, but anyway, that was definitely an issue when it came to Huawei. But yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. Yes?
But I just think it's funny on the news here, they always pronounce it Huawei. They just keep saying Huawei. So it just shows how, Americans don't really understand Chinese at all. They don't even say Huawei.
Yeah.
So I doubt that most news organizations know anything about the company.
Agreed, which is why it goes back to my point where if you have a chance to go overseas, I don't care what country, go. The better traveled you are, the more open, and you just learn so much more, and you become so much more accepting of everything. So yeah, another example I'll use is CFIUS. Does everybody know what CFIUS is? CFIUS? CFIUS, and I keep on forgetting what the acronym stands for. However, I will tell you what it is. CFIUS is a review that is conducted by the US Treasury Department, okay? Of every single, I don't want to say every single, of foreign dollars that are invested in the US, okay? I can tell you that in 2013, less than 5% of all the foreign direct investment actually went through CFIUS review. After the start of this administration, I dare say that number has increased. As a matter of fact, they've added another level, and they've also expanded the type of sectors and industries that are being covered or reviewed for foreign dollars that are invested in those areas. Even real estate, which I thought was ridiculous. So that's CFIUS. And where was I going with that again? But yeah, so about CFIUS, when we talk about, so a lot of Chinese companies, for example, they would complain and they say, hey, why is the US government not letting us, why did the US government not allow this company to close the deal in Seattle? Or it was in the Northwest, and I forget which deal it was. And I said, it was next to a US Navy base. Come on, that's a national security. I'm sorry, if Americans went to China to do something similar, you'd probably say, nope, it's not gonna happen, you're not investing. Same thing, right? And they would just shut up and walk away. That's happened to me many times. They think that they're getting picked on when it's actually quid pro quo. It's same thing. We're doing exactly what you would do to us, right? If we were to invest in your military, do you really think you're gonna let us do that? No, come on, it's not gonna happen. Or even close by because you're afraid that we're gonna be, spying on you. Same thing. So CFIUS has been going on, and I would say that it really has, and people have asked me, so because of the current administration with CFIUS restrictions, increasing, is that better or worse than before? And I'll say, First of all, I'll say it's not good because I did write a letter, right, to the city of San Francisco saying, hey, if we're going to have our lobbyists talk to DC, please say it's bad because look at look at the real estate in San Francisco. A lot of it is being built because of foreign dollars and money coming from China, and we need housing. So if the money comes in, we can build more housing for the people. It's not rocket science, right? However, and so I will say personally, the scrutiny is not a good thing. But what the banks are doing that is important is they are, when they're imposing on the other side, what we say, know your client, right? Where's the money coming from and doing all the FACTA, that is important because we do want to make sure the money is not coming from, illegal sources or what have you, right? So there's always, two sides to every single story in that regard. Any comments or questions before I move on? No. So back to Huawei. Who do you think that the US government was right in arresting their CFO in Vancouver? How's that for a loaded question? Oh no, this is not gonna be recorded. We're gonna cut this, right? Yeah.
Canadians went through the extradition at the U.S. request.
Yes.
The U.S. did not.
Yes, okay, so I'll rephrase my question. Okay, I'll rephrase my question. Do you think it was right for the CFO of Huawei to be arrested, period? We'll leave it at that. Any comments? Because I'm not going to say anything if nobody does. Okay.
Well, the charges were brought. Sorry, the charges were brought by the U.S. and since the CFO has homes in Vancouver, she was accused, and this was dealt with this morning too, of going around U.S. sanction laws with Iran and North Korea. And the U.S. claimed when they delivered it to the Canadian government that they had very heavy evidence to say that she was very, very directly involved in that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the Canadians have paid a very high price. And then when President Trump said that he might use Huawei as a bargaining tool, that did not go well in Canada at all.
I say it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Did she deserve to get arrested? I would say probably yes, right? Did it have to happen that way? I would say no. It could have been done very quietly. Just like all the things that happen in China, things are done very quietly. People, and I'll give you another example.
People disappear.
I'm gonna give.
If you exercise.
Who knows about HNA? Do you guys know what HNA is? Hainan Airlines? Hainan Airlines? Okay, they're actually known as HNA. What was he, the chairman? When they said he committed suicide, do you think that was real or fake? Or that, somehow. Do you think that was real or fake? I think it was fake, but that's just me. Anyway, so now that we're talking about this and so I will use an example of what China has done when they had to address issues. I actually have quite a few stories about that. But the thing is that when they had issues with some of their quote-unquote entrepreneurs that were doing things that the government was not too happy about, namely Anbang. Who knows Anbang? Anbang is the insurance company. Anbang is the insurance company that I never heard about until they bought Waldorf Astoria in New York. My friend, who was the former treasury officer for Bank of China, did not know the existence of Anbang. And he was working in New York, and he's from China. He did not know Anbang until they walked into his office in New York. He says, geez, I didn't even know this company existed. This is an insurance company, and they just come and pay the highest price ever for a building in New York City, okay? When the Chinese government decided that this guy had to go, he was married to a family member of Deng Xiaoping. They arranged that divorce happen. They arranged for him to divest of of basically many of his assets and make sure everything was taken care of, so the wife was taken care of. And then they said, you are stepping down as the CEO and you're coming back to China. That literally happened overnight. I mean, there's a process, but the thing is that when all that happened, it was very quiet. And they announced that he had stepped down and resigned, when actually China said, you're going back to China, you're going to jail. That's how the Chinese would like to get things done, quietly, right? And people do disappear, sorry.
What did he do that he got in trouble for?
I do not know the exact details, but what I can say is that, like many of the other companies whose founders have gotten into trouble, is over leveraging. China, over the years, because they had to continue growing. You know, in China, I tell people the difference for people who want to do business in China and US. In China, it's a top-down mentality. If the boss says you have to do it, like if the Chinese leadership, if they say you have to do it, everybody's going to do it, and it goes down to the very, you know, the consumers and what have you, right? In the US, it starts from the ground up. The government does whatever the residents, the voters, the businessmen, the consumers want, right? Because we tell them what we want, because we vote for legislators, put them in place, and they represent us. But it goes the other way. So it's top down, over here is down up. And the reason why I bring that up is because in China, in order to keep up, like for example, whenever China said, hey, we have to grow at this rate, we have to build more housing, we have to create more jobs, we need to, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The companies, the SOEs would lend money, the government would have the banks lend money to the SOEs. The SOEs would build, and the banks, even though, and regardless of whether or not the deal made money, right, they would build and they would spend the money. On a regional level, right, the companies would go to banks, borrow money, the banks would check with the party secretary in the region, they would sign off on it, they would lend the money, and which became a vicious cycle because you kept on borrowing money and then borrowing more money and increasing your debt, right? So literally, companies were spinning all their lending, and they were robbing Peter to pay Paul. And this is really what's been going on for the last 20 years. I've been watching it happen, right? And I will say that Anbang was one of those companies. Wanda was another one of those companies. HNA was another one of those companies. Those three top companies that probably took that route. And there is one story where the founder of Wanda, Wang Jianlin, right? His son asked him, he goes, Dad, how much money do we have? You have enough money. We probably have enough money. You can't spend it in 5 generations. So how much debt do we have? Oh, he can't repay it in 10. If that give you an example, right? So I think that is probably one of the reasons why. And so when you think about a lot of the divesting that's going on, I know, for example, there was one story in the New York Times recently, and I saw they go, oh yeah, HNA had to sell because, you know, the US government forced them because they're too close to Trump Tower. I said, no, that's not true. They had to divest because the Chinese government was telling them to divest. Has nothing to do with them being too close to Trump Tower. Because they, in San Francisco even, they own 2 buildings, and they, as soon as the chairman disappeared, they had to divest of everything, almost all their holdings, all over the world. So, because they had to pay back the Chinese government, they had to repatriate all the US dollars back to China. That's, so I can't even, yeah, go ahead.
I guess, and just in terms of thinking and talking about China-U.S. trade, so we're in probably a bad period right now, right? So, but these things will pass, whenever and when and how, we don't know. But at some point in time, the 2 largest economies in the world are going to be trading. And do you have any ideas, speculation on what basis we will be trading, and what kind of trade will be probably allowed, and encouraged by the two governments?
Trade is still going on. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of who has the upper hand now. The U.S. is still selling soybeans to China. It's just that it's with a 10% discount, if not steeper, right, to make up for the tariffs. So the trade is still ongoing. I don't think the trade is going to stop. It's just that China has options now. If I'm not going to buy, for example, soy from the U.S., I could buy from Brazil, right? The thing, what China has realized is that I have options now. Fine, if you're going to impose these tariffs on me, I'm going to do the same, and I'm just going to buy from someone else. Why shouldn't they?
Well, I mean, by that measure, the
Right.
U.S. also is realizing, or perhaps that, that the rest of the world can buy something other than a Boeing airplane, right? So, or they can buy it from somewhere else. And clearly, the beneficiary, much of the beneficiary of over the past years of either the U.S. debt, somebody's been buying a lot of U.S. debt.
Yes.
U.S. real estate.
Yeah.
Trump's really happy about those. And others. I mean, we've welcomed capital, Chinese capital, into real estate, filmmaking, all sorts of things, and I suspect a lot of people would like that to continue when we get past this particular set of negotiations.
I think that a lot of people, I think in general, from what I've seen, everybody wants that to continue. It's just that whether or not, one, the money can come in, and two, whether or not the US government will find out and say, oh, we have to shut you down, right? That's always a question. So I think it will go on. I think that, and I've said this even to the Chinese consulate, to them, even in a group setting like this or similar, where I said, you know what, with all with the trade war starting, I said China will find a way to make things happen. I'm not worried about it. And even for the U.S., I mean, I think that the trade war is a loss for the U.S. because if it's about, I don't want the Chinese here because I don't want them to learn from us, it's not going to happen, because if they don't learn from you, they'll learn from another country. And by the way, if they don't have the U.S. market, they will own the other markets, right? So who does it really hurt? It hurts all of us, right? Us who, we have friends who are working in the space that provides services or provides materials or provides products to the Chinese market, right? We all hurt. It's just a matter of whether or not our president understands that. So it is a tough question, which is why I wanted to bring that up. Yeah.
So I teach government and economics, so first semester and second semester. One of the questions that a lot of students ask is, like you're saying, with the government kind of asserting its control over business, whether they're abroad or at home. But then there's a big upper and upper middle class group of Chinese who have a lot of money and want their influence to continue to keep that money. How does the government and economic relationship between that, whereas the Communist Party, many of those people are members of the Communist Party, and they might want to create voice and create an environment where their businesses can continue to grow and their power can continue to grow. How does that relationship work within the party with this growing upper and upper middle class Chinese group?
Let's use Ma Yun, right? Alibaba, right? He has been probably the most vocal of the Chinese government of any entrepreneur that I know. And one of the reasons why he can be vocal is because he's running a shadow bank. He's not relying. Who knows what a shadow? Does everybody know what a shadow bank is? Yes, no. So everybody knows what Alipay is, right? Alipay is basically Alibaba's bank, right? They have this mechanism. They're not using the traditional banks like Bank of China or ICBC or what have you. It's their own, basically, bank cash that they control. And they probably control more cash than any of the other institutions, traditional institutions, because of that. And the Chinese government has been afraid, by the way, of what this shadow bank can do, right, to the economy in China. He has been the most vocal. And I don't see the Chinese government really stopping him in whatever he's saying. Yeah, I don't see that stopping him. Now, is everybody going to be as vocal? I don't know. But then again, also know that traditionally, I would say not tradition, culturally, the Chinese have a saying of don't forget where you come from. If you made your money based on the government and having them lend you money, do you really think you're going to talk against the government? Right. So they may not. Many of the founders and entrepreneurs that I have known over the years, and they're all billionaires, like $3-5 billion net worth. They don't say anything about the government at all. They'll grumble. I'm sure and I've heard their staff grumble, but they've never said anything negative about the government. I mean, at the end of the day, think about it. I call it socialist capitalism. It's amazing, right? Communism, China is a communist society. However, they have allowed free enterprise to happen. I call it socialist capitalism. And if, for example, the millennials these days in China, they don't see anything wrong with communism because they're able to do everything that you and I can do here, right? They have their smartphone, they'll use a VPN and then, have access to overseas websites, right? And search engines, right? They don't see the difference. They can travel, they can get a visa and then a US visa, a 10-year visa, and come to the US whenever they want, right? The millennial of today in China does not see any difference between communism of what it is today to the communism that many of us know because of the Cultural Revolution and what have you. They don't see that at all. So I don't think it's going to change. Unfortunately, we just have to find a way to work with it. So that's your job. You have to teach the kids to grow up and learn how to be smart and work with the leaders of the world. Any other questions? I'm done.